The cloudy sky stretched over a small university town in Oregon, the streets slick from a steady drizzle. Alex Carter, a 24-year-old struggling medical student, walked briskly along the damp sidewalk, his backpack heavy with books and the weight of looming bills. His late mother's hospital debts and his sister's school fees left little room for hope. His phone vibrated, breaking his troubled thoughts. "Hello, Alex speaking," he said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "This is Margaret Sinclair," came a smooth, authoritative voice. "I'd like to discuss an opportunity with you. It's about your financial situation." Alex frowned. "Sorry, do I know you?" "How?" "I know enough," she cut in sharply. "Meet me at Sinclair Manor Cafe. It's important." Before Alex could respond, the line went dead. Confused and intrigued, he made his way to the upscale cafe, shielding himself from the rain with a tattered umbrella. The place was grander than anything he'd experienced, its interiors warm and inviting. In a corner sat Margaret Sinclair, an impeccably dressed woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and an air of command. "Mr. Carter," she greeted, motioning him to join her. Alex hesitated before sitting. "Mrs. Sinclair, why am I here?" She smiled faintly, her expression unreadable. "I understand your situation. Debts, part-time jobs barely making ends meet, a sister relying on you. I'm offering you a way out." His brow furrowed. "What kind of way out?" She leaned in slightly. "Marry me." Alex stared, stunned. "I don't understand." "Marry you?" "You heard me," she said firmly. "This is a business arrangement. I'll pay off every cent of your debts and secure your future. In return, you'll be my husband. Nothing more, nothing less." "Why me?" Alex stammered. "You don't even know me." "That's precisely why," she said, her tone sharp yet calm. "You're young, unattached, and in need. I require a companion, someone to stand beside me and give my estate the stability it needs. Love is irrelevant." The words hung in the air, heavy with implications. Alex's instincts screamed at him to leave, yet the weight of his obligations held him in place. "I need time," he said finally, standing. "This is a lot." "Take the night," Margaret replied, unbothered. "But my offer won't last forever." Back at his modest apartment, Alex sat with his younger sister, Emily, as she completed her homework. The bills piled on the table seemed to grow taller by the minute. When he told her about Margaret's offer, Emily's youthful face paled. "That's crazy, Alex," she said softly. "But maybe she's right. If it helps us." "You want me to marry someone I barely know?" Alex asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. "No," Emily said, tears in her eyes. "I want you to have a chance to breathe." The next morning, Alex returned to the cafe, Margaret already seated, sipping tea. "I'll do it," he said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Margaret's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "Good. Preparations will begin immediately." A week later, in a quiet courthouse, Alex and Margaret exchanged vows in a brief ceremony. The few attendees included Margaret's lawyer and the notary. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Margaret extended her hand to Alex with a thin smile. "Welcome to the next chapter of your life, Mr. Carter." As they arrived at Sinclair Estate, Alex was struck by its size and grandeur. The sprawling mansion loomed like a fortress, its high gates and ivy-covered walls exuding an air of secrets. Margaret led him inside, her every step measured. "You'll find your quarters on the east wing," she said, her tone businesslike. "Dinner is served at 8. Don't be late." The room prepared for Alex was as luxurious as it was unwelcoming. Antique furnishings, a massive four-poster bed, and curtains heavy enough to block out the world filled the space. Yet, it felt as though no one had truly lived there for years. Over the next few days, Alex explored the estate, learning little. The staff, though polite, avoided him, whispering as he passed. Locked doors lined the hallways, their presence unnerving. Margaret, meanwhile, remained enigmatic, sharing little of her life or intentions. One evening, during dinner, Alex mustered the courage to ask, "Why me?" There had to be others who could have filled this role. Margaret set down her glass of wine, her gaze piercing. But none of them were suitable. You were the perfect choice, Alex. And in time, you'll see why. Her cryptic answer left him unsettled. Later that night, Alex wandered into the library, where a small, ornate key glinted on Margaret's desk. His curiosity burned. He pocketed the key and made his way to one of the locked doors he'd passed earlier. The key fit perfectly, the lock clicking open. Inside, Alex found a room filled with photographs, letters, and documents spanning decades. One name appeared repeatedly: Charles Sinclair. He realized Margaret's late husband was connected to his own family. Old news clippings hinted at a business rivalry between Charles and Alex's father, which ended in tragedy for both. Alex confronted Margaret the next morning, holding one of the photographs. "You knew my father. This wasn't random, was it?" Margaret's expression remained calm, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of emotion. "No, it wasn't random. But that doesn't mean it wasn't necessary. What are you trying to achieve?" Alex demanded. Margaret sighed, her facade cracking slightly. "Redemption, Alex. For my mistakes, for your father's, for everything that was lost. You were my way to set things right." Alex stared, the weight of her words sinking in. He had agreed to a bargain, but now he wondered, was he a pawn in Margaret's plan, or her chance at absolution? The mansion was cloaked in an unsettling quiet as Alex moved carefully down the dimly lit hall. The key in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each step, its metallic coolness a reminder of the secrets it might unlock. His pulse raced as he neared the door that had caught his attention days earlier, its intricate handle glinting faintly in the pale moonlight filtering through the tall windows. Glancing over his shoulder, Alex slid the key into the lock, holding his breath as the mechanism clicked softly. The sound echoed in the silence, sending a shiver through him. The door creaked open, revealing a room seemingly untouched for decades. Faded wallpaper, dusty furniture, and an air of abandonment filled the space. On a table near the window stood several tarnished silver frames displaying old photographs. They depicted a younger Margaret, a man who appeared to be her late husband, and an unfamiliar couple. But it was the desk at the far end of the room that drew Alex's attention. He approached cautiously and began sifting through the papers scattered across the desk. Legal documents outlined failed business ventures involving Margaret's late husband and Alex's father. Among them, he found a sharply worded letter accusing Alex's father of betrayal and deceit. "You destroyed everything. You left us with nothing because of your greed," the letter read. Alex's heart pounded as he picked up another paper, a marriage license with his name and Margaret's, dated weeks before their actual wedding. His hands trembled as he set it aside and opened an old leather-bound diary. The entries were Margaret's, detailing a calculated scheme to ensnare Alex in marriage, all part of a broader plan to exact revenge for past wrongs. "I will take from him what his father took from me. He will serve my purpose as a pawn in this game," one entry read. The creak of the door behind him froze Alex in place. "Finding what you were looking for?" Margaret's icy voice pierced the stillness. He turned sharply, guilt and fear etched across his face. "Margaret, curiosity can be dangerous, Alex," she interrupted, stepping into the room with an air of menace. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Alex swallowed hard, his voice unsteady but resolute. "Why did you really marry me? Was this all about my father? Some kind of revenge?" Her eyes narrowed, her composed facade giving way to something darker. "You've already benefited more from this arrangement than you deserved. Don't question what you don't understand." Alex's frustration boiled over. "You've manipulated me. This isn't a marriage, it's a trap. You used me to settle a score that has nothing to do with me." Margaret's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Perhaps you should have considered that before agreeing to my terms. You may think you're clever, Alex, but you're no match for me. You're as blind as your father was." Alex's voice cracked with anger. "If you hated him so much, why punish me? I had no part in what happened between you and him." Margaret stared at him coldly before turning to leave. "You're in far over your head, Alex. I suggest you stay out of matters that don't concern you." That night, Alex lay awake, unable to escape the torrent of thoughts racing through his mind. The damning papers and Margaret's words haunted him, painting a picture of a woman whose life had been consumed by bitterness and vengeance. Unable to shake his unease, Alex slipped out of bed and made his way toward Margaret's study. Pressing his ear to the door, he caught snippets of her conversation. "The transfer needs to be finalized," she said sharply. "There's no room for mistakes." "He's locked in now." Alex's stomach churned. Whatever Margaret had planned, it was bigger and more dangerous than he had imagined. The next morning, Alex sat alone in the library, trying to make sense of the situation. The grand estate now felt suffocating, its grandeur a mask for the sinister machinations at play. Desperate for answers, Alex approached Mr. Green, the head butler, a man whose composed demeanor suggested he knew more than he let on. "Mr. Green, I need your help," Alex said urgently. "Something isn't right, and I think you know it." The butler studied Alex for a moment before speaking. "I wondered how long it would take for you to realize. Margaret has her reasons, but they're rarely kind. Be careful, Alex. Why are you still here if you know what she's capable of?" Alex pressed. A shadow of regret crossed Mr. Green's face. "Sometimes, circumstances leave us with no choice but to stay." Determined to escape Margaret's control, Alex contacted his old law school friend, David, under the pretense of a hypothetical discussion. "David," Alex asked cautiously, "if someone were coerced into signing a legal agreement under false pretenses, could it be invalidated?" David tilted his head. "Hypothetically? If you could prove coercion or deception, maybe. But is something wrong?" Alex forced a smile. "No, just research for a project." "Thanks." Over the next several days, Alex carefully searched Margaret's study whenever she was away, hoping to uncover evidence to free himself. Late one night, he discovered a letter addressed to his father, written in Margaret's unmistakable handwriting. It accused his father of embezzlement and outlined how his actions had devastated her family, leading to her husband's death. "You left us to ruin. You took everything. Now I will take everything from your son," the letter ended. The revelation left Alex reeling. Margaret's motives were deeply personal, rooted in years of pain and resentment. But he couldn't let her destroy him to avenge her past. The following morning, Margaret confronted him at breakfast, her presence as cold and foreboding as ever. "You've been busy," she said, her voice like steel. Alex looked up, feigning innocence. "I don't know what you mean." Margaret leaned closer, her tone dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Don't test me, Alex. If you think you can cross me, you'll regret it. Remember who holds the power here." The mansion was cloaked in an uneasy quiet as Alex wandered its halls, grappling with the stark reality that escape could be even more perilous than staying. Yet, staying meant surrendering himself to Margaret's calculated plans, a life of servitude and manipulation that Alex refused to accept. The air within the estate felt charged as Alex paced the library, the weight of his discoveries pressing down on him. The private investigator he had discreetly hired had just departed, leaving Alex with the damning confirmation he had feared. Margaret's late husband, Edward Sinclair, had been deceived by Alex's father in a fraudulent investment scheme that wiped out the Sinclair family's wealth. Edward's untimely death from a heart attack had been the devastating conclusion, leaving Margaret embittered and determined to avenge the wrong. Margaret's proposal to marry Alex had been more than a cold business arrangement. It was her ultimate act of revenge, a strategy to make his family suffer even years after his father's death. Anger surged through Alex as he clenched his fists. How could she hold him accountable for the sins of his father? Yet, beneath his anger, he felt a faint pang of understanding for the pain that had driven her. That evening, Alex met with David in secret. Together, they compiled the evidence Alex had gathered from Margaret's private records and the investigators' findings. Hidden within the documents, they uncovered Margaret's current dealings, partnerships that skirted legality and falsified reports that propped up her restored financial empire. "David," Alex said, his voice low but resolute, "we need to put an end to this." The next morning, Alex sat in the grand sitting room, the evidence carefully stashed in his bag. He awaited Margaret, who eventually entered with her usual composed demeanor. "Alex, I hope this interruption is worthwhile," Margaret said curtly, raising an eyebrow. Alex stood to face her, his voice firm as he produced the incriminating documents. "I know everything, about my father, about Edward, And about the lengths you've gone to rebuild your fortune? For the first time, Margaret's icy exterior cracked. Her eyes darted to the papers Alex held, her jaw tightening. "You've been prying where you don't belong," she said sharply. "Do you have any idea what your father did to my family?" Alex stepped forward, anger flaring in his voice. "I know he wronged you, but that doesn't justify what you've done. You've dragged innocent people into this, including me. I didn't deserve any of this." Margaret's voice turned cold, her eyes narrowing. "And my family deserved to be ruined? My husband deserved to die in agony while your father faced no consequences? Don't speak to me about justice, Alex." Alex's hands shook as he held the documents higher. "Revenge won't bring Edward back, Margaret. It won't undo the past. You've destroyed lives trying to fill that void. When does it end?" For a brief moment, Margaret's expression softened. Her shoulders sagged, and something resembling regret flickered in her eyes. "You remind me of him," she said quietly. "Edward. That same defiance, that same fire. I didn't expect to feel anything for you, Alex, but here we are." Alex hesitated, startled by her admission. "If that's true, then stop this. Let it go before you lose everything again." Before Margaret could respond, the sound of car tires crunching on the gravel outside reached their ears. Moments later, police officers entered the room, followed closely by David. "Margaret Sinclair," an officer announced, "you are under arrest for multiple counts of fraud and conspiracy." Margaret's eyes narrowed as she turned to Alex, her voice dripping with venom. "You did this." Alex's gaze didn't waver. "You gave me no choice." As Margaret was escorted out, she cast one final look over her shoulder. "Don't think you've won, Alex. Revenge has a way of lingering. Be sure it doesn't consume you." Months later, Alex sat in a quiet courtroom, watching as Margaret faced the consequences of her actions. Despite her betrayal, Alex had testified in her defense, not to absolve her but to acknowledge the complexity of her motives. His testimony had contributed to a reduced sentence, though it left him grappling with conflicting emotions. Margaret glanced back at him as the verdict was read, her expression devoid of malice. Instead, there was a faint nod, a gesture that carried something akin to acceptance. Weeks after the trial, Alex received a letter from Margaret. In her elegant handwriting, she wrote, "Alex, for years, I let revenge dictate my life, believing it was the only way to honor Edward's memory. But I see now that it was a prison of my own making. Your courage, even in the face of my betrayal, taught me a lesson I never thought I'd learn, that forgiveness isn't a weakness but a strength. Thank you for breaking the cycle I couldn't." Margaret. Reading the letter, Alex felt an unexpected sense of closure. He sold the Sinclair estate soon after, using the proceeds to pay off his family's debts and start anew. A portion of the funds established the Edward Sinclair Memorial Fund, a scholarship dedicated to second chances. It was a gesture that symbolized healing, a way to honor the man whose legacy had been overshadowed by bitterness. Alex returned to his studies with renewed purpose, interning at a legal aid center to help others who had been wronged and left without recourse. His experiences at the Sinclair estate had reshaped his understanding of justice, compassion, and redemption. A year later, Alex stood at a ceremony for the scholarship recipients. Behind him, a plaque read, "The Edward Sinclair Fund for Second Chances." He addressed the group with conviction. This isn't just about financial support. It's about creating hope and turning pain into purpose. After the ceremony, Alex lingered for a moment of reflection. The turbulence of the past year had irrevocably changed him, but he felt at peace with the direction his life had taken. Margaret's letter remained tucked in his pocket, a quiet reminder of the lessons they had both learned. As Alex walked away, the sky above was clear and bright, a fitting symbol for the fresh start he had earned.